to another episode of Leaving Nothing Undared, a podcast from Oblate School Theology's Department of Continuing Education. My name is Antonio Fritzi. I'm your host. I thank you for joining us again, because today we're going to have an incredible conversation with two women facilitators for our upcoming virtual series covering the incredible work and mercy of women mystics from various traditions. Now, Oblate School Theology's mission is to educate, form, and renew men and women to preach the gospel to the most abandoned. To that end, we endeavor to cultivate and curate learning experiences that really drive us to deepen our sense of connection with God and a sense of our own spirituality. I'm excited to share with you again our upcoming course on Mirabai Starr's book, Wild Mercy, facilitated by Rosalyn Collier and Pat Daniels. Let's get started. I would love to begin with a discussion of your experience coming to mysticism, the faith journey that you've had, and how mysticism, particularly the work of women mystics that we'll come to encounter in this book, have influenced your journey.
Well, Antonio, probably 20 years ago, I happened on a book by Pollyann Flinders, and the name of that book was Enduring Grace. Over that time, I've offered it twice here at Oblate, and it's a book about 7 women Christian mystics. And it really opened my eyes to that whole interior world of the presence of God. I think prior to that, I'd heard about mysticism, but I wasn't really, I didn't understand it, or it didn't speak to me. And it occurred to me at some point that the title of the book, Enduring Grace, there's a double meaning for the word enduring. It's not just an adjective meaning grace that lasts for hundreds of years. It's also a verb. How do we endure? How do we stand and make room for God's grace within us? It's not always easy. It's not always what we had in mind for our lives. And so I probably read the book through, 4 or 5 times. I just love it. And it had Catherine of Siena, Teresa of Avila, and some of the people that we're going to talk about in Wild Mercy. So in August, on my birthday, my friend Pat Daniels gave me a copy of Mirabai Starr's book, Wild Mercy. And I had it for a couple of weeks and hadn't had time to look at it. But, oh my gosh, once I got into it, it was like part 2 of Enduring Grace, because this book has some of the Christian mystics, women Christian mystics, but it also has mystics from very different faith traditions. And I was so taken by that particular notion of inclusiveness, that, God comes to people in all different faiths, countries, religions, customs, etc. And I felt like, today is a kind of a special feast day. It's a feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And that whole notion of Mary appearing to Juan Diego in this kind of foreign culture, because the Europeans didn't think that this was a particularly sacred space, but that was sort of the blessing of it. And then I woke up this morning and I was going through my news feed, and Pope Francis talked, I guess yesterday, about the fact that all faith traditions are trying to lead us to the Holy One. So it just felt like confirmation on all sorts of ways. And once I got into the book, I just thought, oh, this needs to be shared. This book is timely right now. This book is a gateway to looking at the idea that the feminine face of God is struggling to be born in our world.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's an incredible weaving through of a number of important notes that I want to make sure we hear in this conversation, right? This idea of gift, this idea of encountering God in the unfamiliar, and then, of course, your partner in crime here, who offered and gifted this book that we now strive to gift to others, right, Pat? And, Pat, I know that you have had your own mystical journey and experience throughout your life, a number of workshops and retreats, and, Rosalyn mentioned that this is really timely. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that kind of connection between your faith journey and mystical experience, as well as its connection to the world we find ourselves in.
That's a big job. I think, Antonio, I have to say that this morning before I woke up, I thought, when was the first time I knew about God? When was the first time I had any kind of idea in my head? And I realized that I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I was going into kindergarten, and the idea of God was really presented in a way that was deeply personal. That there was a presence within me to hear me and guide me and cared about me, and it wasn't Santa Claus. It was definitely. But then the immediate response to that, well, if God's inside me, I can talk to him, So I remember distinctly singing to God or talking to him and talking in my dreams. And believe it or not, at some point they were talking to us about the Trinity, and I went to sleep and God told me what that mystery was, because he said it was a mystery. And that intrigued me at that time. But I realized that God communicates himself through someone, right? Even at that age and stuff. So that idea of knowing that the sacred exists and looking for God, or being a seeker, or having that longing to be one with God, has been part of my life. And specifically, I'm not a native Texan. I came to Texas and was teaching at UT, and my youngest son had a little boy who was born as a failure to thrive baby. So it was a very difficult time in our life, because I was going back and forth to Michigan to try to help them, because he couldn't ingest food. He was worked on survival every time he had a meal. And what happened was I had to tell the department I worked for that I need some time off to do this going back and forth. But what that left me with, I didn't have many people I knew in Texas, and I'm from Austin, and Oblate was the only one that offered this continuing ed course. And it was like a lifesaver. And that's where, when it was Bridges to Contemplative Living, using reflections from Thomas Merton, who I loved. So I came down, and Rosalyn was leading that. And in that, they had, as a part of the way of reflecting and sharing, the contemplative listening. And at that time, I needed a community. And the idea that they all spoke a language that, when you hear something, it goes straight to your heart and you know that it's the truth. So I was in a room full of people, strangers, who were speaking a language that my friends didn't talk about, that they do at church, but it wasn't the community sharing. It wasn't that feeling of belonging. And soon after that I joined that group, I had to leave because they put the baby into
palliative.
Yeah. He went into hospice, and we went through his death. But what I realized in that, because I had been in the group, and because it's part of what I was listening to, is that in that process of difficulty, and the family all came together, and we all sat together, and we held the baby and went through the whole thing. But I realized that God is the center of the community, and it's that deep presence that's always with us. I mean, Jesus said, "Abide in me, and I will abide in you." and we don't know it, but we're surrounded by God. We live in God. And that idea that I don't know how that happens, but I know that it's real. And I work every day and have found people that are doing this every day. And I think it's what we call mysticism. I think it's dealing with the mystery of being alive, being centered, and allowing this Holy Spirit to work within you. So that's where it started. Then I worked through Forest Dwellers, and they use that contemplative listening and that idea of contemplation in the meetings, in the prayers. So it just seems to be a part of Oblate, at least from my experience, and Rosalyn too. So, and the thing about it is you wanna share it with everybody. It's not something that needs to be just all by yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for offering that. Part of, I think, what we discover when we engage in this kind of contemplative dialogue of bringing our real and sincere, authentic selves to conversations like this, building community, might be another word for it, is that we find that the moments that we talk about are often those moments that have been quite difficult in our lives, right? And we've referred to this course or this program as, this kind of fierce and tender wisdom, right? This kind of fierce and tender experience of God. And that it's the self-same experience, right? That experience that you had with your family and the passing of that child is not, something that everyone can look at and find the godliness in it, right? But this experience of mysticism, and critically, I think, as you point out, coming together in community opens that door for us, right? There's a lovely sentiment that I like to bring to these kinds of conversations, that everything that we encounter changes us, right? And we change everything that we encounter. So this God thing is not something that we can do alone, right? This workshop is an experience not only to build community with other human beings, but in the presence of God, and intentionally and explicitly. So I want to thank you again for offering that experience, and to both of you for being willing to put on this kind of workshop and opportunity for people. Turning to that, right? Some of the practicalities of it. I'm wondering, and I'll start with Rosalyn, if you could speak to a bit of the structure or what registrants might expect from joining this.
Yeah. I like to think about the 8 weeks that we're going to be together as a pilgrimage. So everybody on pilgrimage carries their own story. They're walking together, they're eating together, they're traveling together to the destination in pilgrimage. And we start out sort of as strangers, but I like to say that on Zoom, there's no bad seat in the house. We are all... And Mary Earle had this wonderful phrase that she used to use, the little squares where you see people's face on Zoom, and that can be kind of off-putting because we're not in person, but we really work hard to create the sense of community. And Mary Earle's phrase was, look on your screen and you may see 12 or you may see 16 little squares. Think of them as icons of presence, that each person is present, listening, and there's a whole screen full, and then you can go to another screen and there's another whole screen full of icons of presence that are sort of the mirror of who you are, who God is for you. And I just love that. So we pay a lot of attention in the 8 weeks to making the experience online, because now we have, a lot of times we have people from Canada, we have people from Hawaii, we have people from, all over the United States or all over Texas. And so we work, the book itself has 12 chapters. And the whole first session that we have, the first 2 hours that we have, is getting to know each other and having a little introductions. Pat and I introduce ourselves, and then we ask people to introduce themselves. And why did they decide to take this course and not that course? And what is it that they're looking for on this pilgrimage as we are going down the road together? And so the overall general structure is that then every week you're asked to read 2 chapters of this Wild Mercy, and to really see what the thread is from what Mirabai Starr is talking about, the thread in your own life. How is that leading you? It's going to be different for Pat. It's going to be different for Antonio. It'll be different for the people there. But what's the common thread? And the beauty of this book is that every chapter ends with one paragraph on deepening, and that's what she calls it, deepening the experience in the chapter. So what you've read, you take in, you chew on, and then you bring it to the group on that day. And so that's, first one is introductions, the next 6 are 2 chapters at a time, and then the last one is we harvest that last session. How have we become the same or different from the first session? What has happened to us? So that the course is not about information, but rather transformation of how have we changed, and what is it that we see now that we didn't see before. And so the structure of each course, of each time, starting with 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, is we start with quiet time, 10 minutes, body prayer, 5 minutes, journal time about your week, about the meditation, about the body prayer, about the chapters, whatever you want to write for 5 minutes. And then we're going to have either Pat or myself give a little presentation on the 2 chapters and the themes that Mirabai Starr touches on. And then we take a break and encourage people to get up, stand up, walk around, get something to drink, walk outside, smell the fresh air if you live in a place that's not freezing cold, and come back refreshed after 10 minutes. And then we break into dyads. We're 2 by 2. Veronica is going to put us in rooms on Zoom, 2 by 2. And we have 2 jobs. One job is to listen contemplatively. That's the most important job. Listening without speaking, without fixing, without suggesting, just listening. And the second job for the other person is to speak. And if they run out of things to say, just to allow silence for 4 minutes. So we have 4 minutes of speaking and listening, and then we have 30 seconds of silence. And then the 2 switch. And the person who spoke listens, and the person who listens speaks for 4 minutes, and then we have 30 seconds of silence. And then we come back to the big group, and if anybody would like to share what they spoke or heard or an aha moment, they can share. And then the last 10 minutes or so, we always close with silent meditation and then a prayer or a song, something. That's the 8 weeks, and that's the individual 2 hours.
Thank you. Wow. I want to again pull out some important points, I think, from what you've shared, and then Pat, I'll have a question for you as I conclude that. But you note in the beginning that we're going to be very intentional about getting to know one another and what brought us to this experience and who we are. Right? And I think as we observe Christ in the Gospels, we see that a lot of his metaphors are an inverse of what our reality is, right? Or of what our daily life is. And this kind of intentionality of how we communicate and getting to know one another and engaging in contemplative dialogue is itself a kind of inversion of how we normally communicate in the world.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah. And that's again, there's this ferocity and tenderness in it, in that it's something that we long and hunger for and thirst for, and we're not exactly sure how to do it without these experiences.
That's right.
So I'm hoping, Pat, you might, Rosalyn did a wonderful job of illuminating this idea of contemplative dialogue, but I'm hoping that you might speak a bit more to what it is, and then that kind of balancing between the individual contribution and coming together as a group and sharing what we've engaged.
I think that first of all, you don't have to share anything if you don't want to. You have complete freedom in this to do whatever, to take whatever you want. But part of your journey on this pilgrimage is to identify why you're there, who you are, to yourself. That's it. You look at, what you're doing is you're looking at this book it's about Mirabai's journey. And then you're looking at these different mystics that she's picked, and she's, of course, prejudiced. She pulls of their life what she wants us to see. So we look at this, and then as we take this and reflect on it, like a mirror, we're saying, where do we fit in this picture? And the difficult thing is, it's hard to pin down what you really think. But if you have to speak about your reflection, the things that are kind of more difficult to talk about, people don't talk about these as much, about your relationship with God, about what you think of this life story, about what your life is. All of those are moments of breath and then taking the risk, okay? But when you speak about it and have to talk to someone about it, my experience is you may surprise yourself who you are, or what you say, or what you know, or what you think. And nothing is taboo. You can say or think what. If you don't like a chapter, you need to say that. I don't agree with this, and this is why. What you're doing is trying to integrate. You're trying to be congruent with what your ideals are and your beliefs are, how you're living your life, and what you see around you. And believe me, society tells us what we should think and be and do, and what's good and what's cool. But the avenue to open up, where you walk down and you meet yourself, and you do it in a very friendly group, because all those mystics and Mirabai, she doesn't hold back on anything. She tells whatever she feels like telling. And then if the group is witnessing and holding you and respecting you, making a safe space for you to go on or be crazy or not make sense or be funny or be angry or to cry, to be whatever comes out, even anger, whatever. You have a safe space to say. But the idea is you meet yourself and let yourself be. You let yourself be, and everybody else is there with you, present, holding you up. And I cannot tell you what a gift that is, because maybe, there are things that are very difficult to verbalize. And so if you write them out or if you say something, it's a risk. It's a risk because people judge. And not only that, you judge yourself and say, oh my God, why did I say that? But the idea is that it's okay. It's okay, and you can talk, and someone is right there. And one of the things that Rosalyn instituted is after someone speaks, you take a minute and you just sit, and you don't think about what you have to say. You just turn over what they say and you hold them in prayer in your heart. You bless them. And so that, to me, is a terrific opportunity to do. But it's not easy. And it's scary, but it also gets easier. But the most surprising thing is that you know yourself better once you speak. To be silent and just take everything in, it's an active act of going out to give yourself. And I think providing a safe space for that, providing company along the road, because all of a sudden you've got Mirabai walking with you. She's the teacher, and all of these different saints and goddesses from different regions, all searching for the sacred. It's your tribe, you know. But it's. I think that's probably the miracle. Is that the community? It's not like, what are you going to teach me? It's going to be, who am I going to be when I meet Mirabai? Who am I going to be when I meet these saints? Who am I? You know, I haven't had a chance to meet, a Hindu mystic before in my life. And what is she going to say? And what if all of a sudden I find great fraternity with that, with that person, that they speak my language. And that breaks down the walls. And we feel we live in a community. We live as brothers and sisters. And I think that, it's not like what you get, it's who you are on the pilgrimage. What do you learn about yourself? It's not about covering the mileage. It's about, whoa, can I handle this or not? Or whoa, I can actually walk this walk for a while. So I think it's an experience. It also is a support and an opening of doors that you might not even realize are closed for you. That's sort of what I love about this whole thing. So.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I would point to that vision of contemplative dialogue as this real and sincere encounter of the other, right? And you mentioned that we exist in a situation in that we're often told who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to think, what we're supposed to praise and value, right? And I think one of the most concerning things that we're told is that you ought to stay with, love, be with, communicate with, think like, be like only people who are already like you, right?
Yes.
And this image of encountering the unfamiliar, right, on the feast day of Our Lady Guadalupe, right? Yeah. And this image of a God who went to people who were different than him in many ways, right, in their occupation of a different, tradition within the Jewish faith, right? These people who are different from him. And these were who he sought out to encounter, right? It's this coming to know who we are before God by coming to know who we are before these fellows on the path.
Yes, it's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. So, I would just note, right, this accompaniment is an important part of it. And so to turn again to practicalities, right, we do ask that you bring your own copy of this book, engage with it as we go through these 8 weeks. Are there any other things, more practical things, right, pen and paper or something like that registrants and attendees might, bring?
I do have something to say that I would be remiss if I did not say. And what she described and what you reiterated is that once you get comfortable with contemplative dialogue, your regular life is called into question, and how you conducted conversation before, or how the person you live with, or the family you're in, or the community you're in, because that depth of contemplative dialogue changes something in us to where we listen so deeply that the normal way that we speak doesn't really fit anymore. And so it has, I say that, it's a warning, but what it really is a ripple effect. It starts to infiltrate in your personal life, in your family life, in your community life. This book is free on Kindle Unlimited. Somebody just told me that and was all excited because they do the highlighting. I don't do Kindle so much. I like paper in my hands. But for people who do that, you have your own journal that goes with it, and you can keep track of that. The other thing is for the class and for the week to have the book with you. And I always encourage people to just put the book in their car or put the book in their purse or their bag or whatever. So that when you're at the doctor's office, and many of us at this age are waiting at doctor's offices, you can go back and say, now, what did she say about Teresa of Avila's 4 stages of prayer? And you can go back and instead of stewing about waiting for the doctor for an hour, you can go back and enjoy that. So keeping the book with you or next to your bed at night so that you can easily reference it is good. We encourage people not to gulp it down, because once you get into it, I didn't want to stop. I mean, I did gulp it down. Okay, full disclosure, I gulped it down. But then in the course, we want to take it in a measured way. And by that, you can use journaling, you can write, you can get colors, crayons, do some artwork. My personal favorite is scissors, glue sticks, and old magazines. And I love to collage. And somehow or other, that speaks to me. So if you haven't tried collage, try collage. Do, whatever it is. If you're a dancer, you might just put some music on and work through these things in an incarnational way. Because I think that's what the whole idea of mysticism is, how the incarnation has come into each living person on this earth. People who have lived before us that Mirabai references and that we have in our ancestry, as well as people who are coming after us, that we're in this long line of incarnational gods and goddesses on this earth. We are part of the holy.
Thank you.
Yeah. So any out-of-the-box thinking that you can do and bring to it and suggest, I'm welcoming. And the other thing, Antonio, is people have referred to these classes that we've had here at Oblate before as sort of, especially when we got on Zoom since 2020, as cyber monasteries. They feel like they're not on just a boring Zoom meeting or whatever, but that they actually are stepping into kind of sacred space. So there's this cyber monastery feel. You can almost smell the incense, and there's the icons up on the screen. So we really try to encourage that atmosphere.
Right. And I would point out again, such an inverse of how we typically experience Zoom meetings.
Save us from another Zoom meeting.
And I would point out that encouragement to creativity, right? That encouragement to, again, the ripple effect of this experience in other areas of your life and bringing that creative expression into your experience of the workshop and of the program and of this encounter.
And the other thing I should have said is also being out in nature. And it's finally cooled off enough for us to be able to go outside. In Texas, it's now December. But being out in nature just really heightens all of that. And, looking at the creation and the danger that our world is in with, the whole effect of climate change. So becoming more aware, being made aware of that, and appreciating and praising God for who we are and where we are.
Yeah. And that kind of encounter with the holy in the rest of the world is one of these avenues through which we come to know God and come to know ourselves. And, there's a bit of, to break the fourth wall just a touch, in one of our past conversations, we discussed this kind of common experience, either directly or indirectly, with theater and the expressive arts, and this kind of learning through doing and coming to know how we inhabit our bodies in this incarnational sense, right? So again, that's something that's kind of jarring sometimes, right? And again, something we're a little unfamiliar with. So as we begin to move into the conclusion of our conversation, if y'all could share a bit about what you might say to someone who feels some sense of anxiety or perhaps wariness or just unsureness, right, about this invitation to participate.
Well, I thought about this. And I thought, if you have tuned into this podcast, there's curiosity. there's a reason you tuned into the podcast, and there's an attraction, there's a longing. You've already put yourself in a position because you have a question that you sat down. You know, if you go through Facebook and you say, "Oh, how to clean with 3 different baking powder or vinegar," so you go to watch a podcast for an hour about finding how to clean. Well, this is like that, but this is about your soul talking to you, right? And I heard recently, Marquina Whitaker has a book called Abide, and she talks about listen for the tapping in your heart. So what is it that you're yearning for? What brought you to watch this podcast? It's okay to be afraid. It's okay if you don't know if you want to know about that, or that doesn't seem real. But watch what you've done. You're listening. You have this call. And it's like that idea about impulses. If you continually stifle your impulses, then the impulses don't come anymore. But if you listen to the tapping of your heart or your impulse, and you follow through for yourself, then there's a good probability that you will find an answer, or you will be transformed, or you'll be, like you said, Antonio, there'll be a change at the end of this. So what is that? The dare, what's your motto?
Oh, yes.
Dare.
Leave nothing undared.
Leave nothing undared for the health of your soul and for the love of the world. I mean, it's just, why not? Try this if you have the least inclination. And, you can always step back from it if you say, "Oh, boy, I don't know." But the idea is that be brave. That we used to have a thing when I taught acting. Be afraid, but be brave. And courage comes from the word heart.
To act.
Yeah. And so listen to your heart. And I think that's, and part of what that contemplative living or our relationship with God is understanding that the flow is all around us, that there's a flow that you can get into. And just, I would deeply encourage you to try the course if you have any interest. If this sounds kind of good, but it sounds kind of frightening, it's okay. It's okay to be afraid. Come, see. Yeah.
And I have it's a little bit about how Pat said it, but it's sort of the inverse of it, is that Pat thinks that she found this book, and I think that Pat gave me
That's
this
because
book.
I am hubris.
But what I really believe,
I am the center of the universe.
What I really believe is this book found Pat, and then this book found me. And, as much as we are longing for that love and mercy of God, God is longing for that love and mercy of each one of us. And so many times in my life I've said, I just don't have the time. I can't read this right now. And so many times in my life I've said, no, mystics when the mystics, But how many times am I going to reject the gifts of God? And every now and then I can say yes, and it's a whole different world. It's a whole new thing. So I would just encourage you to think that this is a gift from beyond in so many ways.
If you're interested. Yeah. If it's calling to you.
I really want to conclude with a bit of practice, actually. Rosalyn, before our conversation today, you led us in a kind of breath work and awareness and a silence, right, in preparation of what has proven to be a holy conversation, I would say. And Pat, you noted that in contemplative dialogue, one of the big things that is encouraged is this practice of listening, silence, and at the conclusion of conversation, making that space again. Mm-hmm. So I would ask Rosalyn, if you could please, us along with our listeners, offer us again that kind of practice in silence as a kind of conclusion to this conversation.
All right. Well, just sit comfortably wherever you are, and as you settle yourself into yourself, knowing that God is always with us. Take a deep inhalation and hold it for a moment as we turn our attention inward. And as we blow out through our mouth, let go of any distractions that keep us from getting traction with God's presence in our life, in our heart, and all around us. Take another deep breath and hold it for a moment as we allow ourselves to experience the spaciousness within and the presence of life inside of us, life of grace and mercy, compassion, tenderness, and love. And as we exhale, loosen our joints, relax our muscles, relax our heart, open our jaw, raise our eyebrows, feel ourselves incarnated in this body that has served us throughout our lifetime. And one more deep breath, and as we hold it and gently exhale, making room to accept the invitation from God to be still and know that we are holy ground. Be still and know that we are holy. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. An incredible invitation to join Rosalyn Collier and Pat Daniels for our upcoming series, Fierce and Tender Wisdom, Exploring Wild Mercy, in which we'll cover, of course, Mirabai Starr's book, Wild Mercy. I want to thank Rosalyn and Pat for joining us today, and of course, I want to thank you for joining us again today and for each of our broadcasts. Now, if you're interested in joining this upcoming session, you ought to know that it'll be every Tuesday from 9:30 to 11:30, beginning January 21st and concluding March 11th. The registration fee is $65, and if you want to learn more, see a bit more of the description of what you might expect, I encourage you to check out the link in the description or visit our website www.ost.edu. On behalf of the Department of Continuing Education and Oblate School of Theology, I want to thank you again for joining us and encourage you to never leave anything undared for the gospel or in pursuit of your spiritual growth. God bless you.